Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. And let's go ahead and talk about a program. You know, I've talked about them a lot over the offseason. I don't want to say I've been negative. I think I've been realistic. But let's talk about the North Carolina Tar Heels. So North Carolina, every time we mention it, the context matters here, okay? So the context is pretty straightforward. It was, by any tangible measurement, a disappointing season a year ago. Now, some things are out of their control. They missed on a couple big guys in the portal. If they had a true five-man, I think the entire season is different. RJ Davis was disappointing. For whatever reason, it didn't click. Seth Trimble was banged up. But North Carolina wasn't good. And so I never really believed that Hubert Davis was actually going to be let go during the offseason. But at the end of the day, it was clear changes need to be made, and it was very clear that changes were made going into the offseason. Hubert Davis mentioned before the season even ended, hey, the world has changed. We need a GM. They hired a GM. They raised a bunch of money in NIL. But realistically, looking at their roster, even like a week ago, you kind of sat there and said, like, is there enough there? Like, there's pieces that I like. Caleb Wilson's really good as a five-star, but is he a guy that's going to come in and take over college basketball? I don't know. Jaron Stevenson, I like, but you need him to take a leap. Kyan Evans, coming from the Mountain West, I like, but he needs to make a leap in the ACC. And so I was worried about UNC. I actually did not have them in my top 25 going into the week. And I think, going into coming out of the draft deadline last Wednesday, Thursday, I think the scary part was they seem to be running out of options. Boogie Fland, the report was North Carolina offered him more money. He chose Florida. RJ Lewis, there was a report that they tried to get him back to college basketball. He stays in the draft. Jameer Watkins, I think UNC would have been a factor. He decides to stay in the draft. And so I just bring it up because we're sitting there saying, like, Carolina still needs a dude. And to the credit of Carolina fans, I want to give them credit. They said, Torres, wait until the offseason is over before you evaluate our team. I bring it up because on Saturday, North Carolina might have finally gotten the star that they needed as, I'm going to trip over this name, but Luka Bogavac. Luka Bogavac? Luka Bogavac. Here's what you need to know. 6'6", wing, from Montenegro, one of the best players in Europe, certainly one of the best players in Europe coming to college basketball next year. He commits to Carolina. I got to give credit where it's due. I think if he's as good as we expect him to be, this is the piece that Hubert Davis needed. And if he lives up to expectations, all of a sudden Carolina, very much a factor in the ACC, probably a team that is good enough to compete at the top of that league. All right, so let's start. Luka Bogavac. Okay, so again, I apologize for tripping over his name. I'll learn it by October and November. But again, bottom line, just one of the best players in Europe, period, end of story. From Montenegro, he plays in that Adriatic League, which Adriatic League is where a lot of these guys that are coming from overseas to play college basketball are from. This is the league that produced, I believe, Andreja Jelovic, who's, of course, coming to Kentucky. I know it's the league that produced the dudes that are going to Illinois, Mihailo Petrovic, David Mirkovic. And so this is one of the more competitive, if not the most competitive league in Europe. I kind of did some digging on, I guess it would be Saturday, Sunday after he committed. And I was told basically, look, is it the most, listen, the one of the Euro leagues that has FC Barcelona, Real Madrid, et cetera, is probably the top league. But this is right there. The skill level is through the roof. And this guy, the thing I'll say about him, he is coming to college basketball ready to play next year. First of all, in that league was very good, averaged 15 points per game, 39 or so % three-point shooting. I don't claim to be a European basketball expert, but good stats in a good league, playmaker off the dribble, kind of the scouting report I've been told is great catch and shoot, playmaker with the ball, all of that. The other thing is really two things. Is one, he comes with plenty of international experience, has played for his national team year over year over year for the last 4 or 5 years, and he just comes with a lot of experience, period. He's 21 years old, entering college basketball next year. Now, for people who haven't been following this stuff on a day-to-day basis, this is just kind of becoming normal. Is it right? Is it wrong? Are they taking scholarships from American kids that are 18 years old? Maybe. But UNC is not the first team to do this. I remember last year, BYU brought over a kid that was like, 19. I think Bogovich was. I'm trying to find the name. Yeah. Mahalo Bogovich. Yep, that's my guy, and I liked watching him. But he was like 21, 22 when he got over here. Big Z's brother, Tomislav Ivicic, was like 21, 22 when he got over here. And then again, Illinois brought over several players who were like in that 21 to 22 range. Mihajlo Petrovic and David Mirkovic, both of those guys are on the older side. And so again, whether it's right or wrong, another conversation for another day. There's no rules in the NCAA right now. I don't really care. I want to watch as many good players in college basketball as I can. So credit to UNC for getting this done, because to me, this is the star that they needed. And now all of a sudden you have this guy, and I do believe that the other pieces on the roster now all of a sudden make a lot more sense. You have Seth Trimble back in the backcourt, who was actually really good before he got hurt. You have Kyan Evans, a great three-point shooter from Colorado State, a guy that stepped up and played his best basketball late as Colorado State made a run. Probably in hindsight, should have been in the Sweet 16, had Maryland on the ropes before Derek Queen hits that buzzer beater. Listen, I've said it a million times. I am a big fan of Jaren Stevenson, the wing at Alabama. I know that statistically he didn't put up the greatest numbers. Go back and watch some of those games, though. The Clemson game in the Elite Eight, not last season, but the season before, so the 2024 season, that was the year Alabama goes to the Final Four. They don't go to the Final Four if Jaren Stevenson doesn't have like 18, 19 points in the Elite Eight against Clemson. And so he is a guy that I think with a more defined role, with a bigger role, I think he's going to be pretty good. Remember, this was a guy that kind of got lost in the shuffle at Alabama in that front court with Darion Reed, who's obviously gone, with Cliff Omoyori, with Grant Nelson, etc. But I think Jaren Stevenson has a chance to be a breakout star at Carolina. We mentioned Caleb Wilson. I really like him as a piece. Again, I just don't think he's Darren Peterson or Cam Boozer or Cooper Flagg or whoever that can step in and put a program on his back. And then finally, I do like Henry Visar as well, the transfer from Arizona. We've talked about him plenty, but he is the exact type of player that probably doesn't get enough credit with all these portal rankings and portal news and portal notes because of the fact that basically his role kind of evolved over the course of the season. Quote unquote, only averaged 9.5 points per game and 5 rebounds, but also only played 20 minutes because early in the season he was buried on the bench. So now all of a sudden he gets a bigger role. He was one of Arizona's best players late. This is Henry Visar I'm talking about, and was phenomenal late in the season. 19-4 in a loss at Fog Allen Fieldhouse, 10-7 in the Big 12 tournament, 13-6 against Duke in the Sweet 16. And so I just bring it up because all of these pieces look very nice, but you needed that star player, preferably that can create his own offense, preferably on the wing, preferably a guy that can make plays with the ball in his hands. And that's exactly who this kid is, or at least who he projects to be at the college level. Luka Bogovich. By the way, I've said the name 10 times. I've said it 10 different ways. UNC fans crush me in the comments. I absolutely deserve it. But I just bring it up because to me, he was the guy that you needed. And now, with that said, what stands out to me as well is that I think all of a sudden it does change the trajectory on North Carolina. One thing I always try to do is I try to be fair to everybody. And, I felt like I was being critical early in the offseason, but I thought it was justified. You lost a lot of guys. You didn't know who was coming in. And until you get a guy signed and committed, we have to judge the team based on the roster that they have. But now you have a very, you have that essentially the final big piece of the roster. You have the dude that can get you the buckets that you need to win at the highest level in the ACC. And he fits well with Henry Visar. He fits well with Kyan Evans. He fits well with Jonathan Powell, some of the other guys I haven't mentioned, Jaden Young. And now fast forward, I think all the pieces make a lot more sense. And I think Carolina, in my opinion, is a much better team. So to me, when I look at the ACC, I think, first of all, it's going to be improved. Louisville, I think, is really good. I think Louisville and Duke, Carolina fans, maybe you'll disagree. Maybe you'll yell at me in the comments. I don't know. I think Duke and Louisville, in some order, are the top two teams. They were the top two teams last year. But I do think that second tier now is much better. NC State's a real team. NC State is a real team. We'll wait on later in the week to talk about it. But they have Darion Williams. I really actually like what Miami did. Clemson's always going to have guys, and I think Brunell's kind of figured things out. But I would add, got to give credit where it's due to Carolina, because I really thought that they were a piece short. They get that piece, and I think it does change the trajectory. Again, you don't want to oversell. You don't want to oversell anybody. You don't want to oversell a five-star freshman. You don't want to oversell a big-time transfer. But if this kid clicks the way that we think he can, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that Carolina could compete for an ACC title. I don't know that I'd have him as a favorite today, but I don't think it's impossible to envision the scenario. So credit to Carolina, credit Hubert Davis. They've taken a lot of heat basically since the start of last season. They get the job done. They get their star in Luka Bogovich.